But we'll get things kicked off now. So hi everyone, my name is Erin Ford, and I want to welcome you to Audubon Great Lakes and My Birds webinar, Demystifying Michigan's Wetland Wonders, Nayanquing Point and Wigwam Bay, in partnership with the Wildlife Division of the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and Audubon Great Lakes. Thanks so much for spending the next hour with us. We're really hoping this webinar will be helpful because we know the physical and mental health benefits of experiencing nature are so important for everyone. We're also committed to sharing information about engaging with public lands and making the outdoors safe and welcoming for everyone. And even though it's only July, shorebirds have already begun migrating south, and our neotropical migrants and secretive marsh birds are getting ready to depart the Great Lakes, making it a really excellent time to go birding. Next slide. I'm the Communications Associate with Audubon Great Lakes. My name is Erin Ford, and I manage the My Birds program, which is an outreach and engagement program presented by Michigan DNR's Wildlife Division and Audubon Great Lakes, which aims to increase all Michiganders' engagement in the understanding, care, and stewardship of public lands that are important for birds and people. We also really aim to bridge the divide between hunters and birders over our shared conservation values. Next slide. For those of you who aren't familiar with Audubon Great Lakes, we are a regional office of National Audubon, and we work across the 5 Great Lakes states to restore and protect birds and the places they need to thrive through on-the-ground conservation, outreach, engagement, policy, and advocacy. We have over 215,000 active members across the region, with 43,000 members here in Michigan. We have over 50 chapters across the region, 2 nature centers, and our regional office based out of Chicago. Next slide. So I will be your facilitator today, monitoring the chat box, and will help to facilitate the Q&A session at the end of the program. These are a few housekeeping items before we get started, though I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Zoom by now. This presentation is being recorded, so all participants are going to be muted for the duration of the webinar. But please take a moment to locate that chat function on the Zoom platform to actively participate in the webinar. If you'd like to send a question or comment to the facilitator, please use that chat box. If you'd like to take a moment now to introduce yourself and let us know where you're coming from, where you're watching from, that would be great. And we will be monitoring the chat box throughout the webinar, so please be respectful and appropriate while participating. And once we reach the end of the presentation, we will review the questions you've submitted in the chat box and share those out to presenters during that Q&A session at the end of the program. Next slide. Today we will be chatting all about Nayanquing Point and Wigwam Bay State Wildlife Areas. We're going to learn we're joined by we're joined by several speakers that are experts on these areas, including Jenny Fuller, the project coordinator with National Audubon Society, Kylie McElrath, our conservation manager for Michigan with Audubon Great Lakes, and Brandy Dibus-Berger, who's the wildlife technician for Nayanquing and Wigwam Bay State Wildlife Areas with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. So today we're going to learn about the state of the birds, important bird areas, and Audubon Great Lakes priority regions, Michigan's wetland wonders, and all about Nayanquing Point and Wigwam Bay, including how to access these areas, what recreational opportunities exist there, and what birds you can expect to find, and so much more. At this time, I'm going to pass things over to Kylie, and I see a couple folks have raised hands, so I'm wondering if you might not be able to access the chat. We're going to see if we can change that for you. Thanks all.
Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. And I'm just going to start by giving a little context as to why it's so impactful that you're joining us and engaging in conversations such as this one today. A study published in the scientific journal Science by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology drew attention to the cries for help that our birds are singing. In less than a single lifetime, North America has lost more than 1 in 4 birds, or about 3 billion individual birds. This even includes some of our familiar backyard feeder birds, such as the dark-eyed junco and white-throated sparrows. So the loss of even these more common species, scientists have concluded from this that there's a shift in the ecosystem's ability to support basic bird life. And science conducted by Audubon has further supported this need for action. Audubon's Survival by Degrees report indicates that 2/3 of North American bird species are at risk from extinction due to climate change. And this is largely due to climate change causing birds to shift the timing of their migrations, and it's altered their summer and winter geographic ranges, as you can see in the red here on these maps for the bobolink and the common loon. And this results in a significant loss of their habitat. So these maps are showing these shifts in their ranges under conditions of a 3 degrees Celsius global temperature increase. But if we can reduce this global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius, the threat would be significantly dampened for many species. So what can we do? We're not ready to just throw our hands up at this point. And that's because there's some good news and a glimmer of hope. Populations due to land management practices that mimic natural disturbance that is necessary for their survival. So an example of this would be prescribed burning to mimic natural wildfires that have been suppressed on the landscape. And another beneficial practice is leaving dead standing trees, also known as snags, for nesting ability. And this includes even trees that have been killed off by the emerald ash borer. Waterfowl populations have also seen increases, with credit due to political actions and land management and restoration efforts for wetland habitats. So while these population increases of some categories of birds have given us a glimmer of hope and evidence that land management efforts can be worthwhile, not all wetland-dependent birds are bouncing back like the waterfowl. So this is telling us that there's still more work to be done. So how do we properly focus our management efforts? Well, one method that we can use is by identifying what are known as important bird areas, or IBAs as I'll be referring to them. So IBAs are identified through a network of global partners called BirdLife International, which is comprised of 121 partners worldwide, with one partner representing a country or territory, and is continuously growing. And Audubon is the BirdLife partner for the United States and spearheads the efforts of identifying, monitoring, and protecting the most important places for birds. And Audubon has identified over 2,800 IBAs, which cover a total of over 400 million acres of public and private lands in the US. And here in Michigan, we have a total of 103 IBAs, with 93 of them being state recognized and 10 being globally recognized, which you can see in red on the map. And you'll notice that our focus area for today, Saginaw Bay, is one of the globally recognized IBAs. So in order for an area to be recognized as an IBA, it must meet at least one of these 4 criteria. So it must be known to be home of a species of special conservation concern, have a species of a restricted range, have a species with a specialized habitat type, or contain a high density of species within a particular category of birds. So our big example for today would be marsh birds. So what's the overlap here of these IBAs and the sites that we're talking about today, Wigwam and Nayanquing Point? Well, 54 of Michigan's 103 IBAs are owned and managed by the Michigan DNR, including all of the wetland wonders such as Wigwam and Nayanquing, which you will hear more about coming up. And Audubon is further supporting these targeted conservation efforts through the adoption of our Great Lakes Vision Plan, which aims to stabilize these declining bird populations, as well as improve water quality throughout the watershed through the restoration and protection of critical habitat. To implement this vision plan, Audubon Great Lakes has identified priority areas to narrow in on, much of which overlap with IBAs, where we can focus our conservation efforts to maximize the impact we can have on declining birds, particularly marsh birds, which is why these priority areas are concentrated around the coasts, where we are targeting critical coastal wetland habitats. So zooming in on Saginaw Bay IBA and Audubon Great Lakes Priority Area, you'll notice, of course, Wigwam Bay and Nayanquing Point State Wildlife Area. I mentioned focusing on coastal wetland habitats, and that's what makes Saginaw Bay one of our priority areas. There's a vast amount of coastal wetlands along the bay, which is critical habitat for marsh birds and other wetland-dependent birds and wildlife, but it's vulnerable habitat. So across this region, we are working with partners to conduct marsh bird monitoring, research, and habitat conservation. And we're going to take a deeper dive into that. And so what contributes to this region being a priority area for Audubon Great Lakes and an IBA when we're specifically looking at Nayanquing Point? It consists of about 1,400 acres of habitat that supports not only vulnerable marsh birds such as the American and least bitterns during their breeding season, and it supports one of the few breeding populations of yellow-headed blackbirds in Michigan, but it also supports habitat or provides habitat during migration for species such as tundra swans and many diving ducks. And then when we're looking at Wigwam, this is special to the area because it provides habitat for, again, many breeding marsh birds, but it also supports a colony of the state-threatened black tern, which Jenny will talk more about in just a minute. So after joining us today and learning more about these special public lands, we hope that you'll take the opportunity to get out and find some of these amazing birds. So to give you some examples of what you might want to look for, there's many species of waterfowl, shorebirds, and songbirds at both of these sites. So I will now at this time pass it over to Jenny to talk more about the black tern that I mentioned, to give you a better understanding of why we're focusing so much on this area and specifically Wigwam for the black tern. And then we'll pass it to Brandy to give some more context to what those management efforts look like at both Nayanquing and Wigwam.
All right, thank you, Kylie. So next we're going to be diving into one of our special species that breeds in this region. So if you're unfamiliar with black terns, they're a smaller, unique shorebird that spends their winters off sea, off the coast of South and Central America. And in the summer, they come up to the prairie pothole region of the US and our very own Great Lakes region to nest. So these birds rely on pretty large, healthy wetlands to support their colonies. And they build their nests on these small floating platforms within some stands of vegetation like tussock and cattail and bulrush. So unfortunately, population trends do suggest black terns are declining. The good news is globally, they do remain least concerned, but we really want to make sure they make a comeback here in the Great Lakes and beyond. And reasons for their decline are not entirely clear, but we do know that more than half the wetlands in the Great Lakes watershed have been lost or degraded, which plays a really important factor. And in Michigan, black terns have recently been listed as state threatened, despite it really containing a large proportion of the Great Lakes breeding colonies. So this state is really a major focus for our ongoing monitoring and wetland restoration work. And so our overarching goal is to improve black tern populations and their nesting success in the Great Lakes and beyond. So to do this, we need to identify what threatens their nesting and their survival, and how we can monitor for these over time, and then use this data to better manage the species conservation. And so to help us understand where Wigwam plays a role for supporting black terns, I'll give us some context of where we work throughout the state of Michigan. Next slide. Awesome. So at this time, we have 8 sites with in-depth monitoring. This means any combination of nest cameras, nest checks, and banding. And we also currently have 4 sites where habitat restoration is taking place, primarily removing invasive cattail or Phragmites, which is otherwise known as common reed, which really threatens their habitat. And then at 3 sites, we're testing different forms of platform designs to help improve their nesting success. And between 2021 and 2023, 76 historical breeding sites were checked for their current breeding status. And 25 of these have been confirmed active. So on the map there, you can see the active ones are green. And there's a few unknown sites showing up in purple there that are either inconsistently used or they're not fully explored yet by surveys. And many of our wetland wonder sites are also black tern colonies. Next slide. And so Wigwam State Wildlife Area is a really important part of Michigan's breeding black tern population. It's hosted up to 106 breeding adults at one time, and this colony uses tussock mounds for making nests. So if in that lower right photo there, you can see a close-up of a nest and floating root mats created by water lilies. And because the wildlife area is also a diked unit, it's pretty protected against any major weather-related hazards like wind and waves. And also boating disturbance in the area. But the close proximity of the site to land makes it easier for predators to access their nesting areas. And so nest monitoring has taken place at Wigwam since 2018, which includes head counts, nest checks, and the use of cameras. And sorry to be the bearer of some more bad news, but we did observe a decline in the colony size. And we really look to our camera monitoring to help determine the cause and a way to resolve that issue. Next slide. So nest cameras are a super useful tool in remotely monitoring nests. They're very low disturbance and just a great way to track things over time. We've learned a lot of things like understanding nest success and failure, but also things like our understanding of chick development, their sensitivity to disturbances, and potential threats to nests like trampling by other species, like waterfowl, muskrat, and turtles. And some nests may also be impacted by some storm-related flooding. Next slide. But the real key threat that's apparent in this area are nesting predators. So especially raccoon, mink, and great horned owl. And mink have been detected less frequently, mainly because they might be less commonly just targeting nests, but their small size might also evade detection by our cameras. Great horned owls appear to avoid eating eggs, but there's a good chance they're targeting the chicks. But raccoons have been detected by far the most frequently, and we've seen subcolonies abandon an area after they've shown up on camera in the same location. So we do suspect that the major declines are a combination of really heavy raccoon predation, eating the eggs in their favorable tussock habitat, and using those remaining areas with the water lily that's a bit more limited, that's surrounded by deep water and just not as easily accessed by raccoons. And so now we have an idea of what threatens the nesting terns in the area. We're really hoping to reverse that and hope to implement some strategies that can mitigate this. So one of these is nesting platforms, which can either be used to increase nesting in safer areas away from where raccoons are frequenting. We've also partnered with Stantec on a platform feasibility study. Oh, did we lose our slides?
It looks like it.
So sorry, my Zoom quit on me unexpectedly. I will try and get this back up and going here.
No problem. There we go. So, so as I was saying, so it's with Stantec, we're working on a feasibility study with platforms, and they've created a design that might also help dissuade some predators from trying to access the nest. So creating a special fence that chicks can go to and from and adults can go to and from, but keep the other animals out. So we're also hoping to open up areas that are dominated by pretty dense cattail, where they can't nest, to create more nesting habitat, while tracking raccoon presence with trap cameras to avoid that overlap with them and make sure that the nests aren't continued to be eaten. So with that, I'll pass things on to Brandy to talk more about management of these areas.
My name is Brandy again, so thank you, Jenny, for handing it off to me. I'm going to be talking about Michigan wetland wonders and the managed waterfowl hunt areas. The Michigan DNR Wildlife Division introduced the concept of wetland wonders when referring to our valuable, high-quality wetland areas across the state of Michigan. Many of the wetland wonders detailed on this map may also double as Audubon important bird areas and/or managed waterfowl hunt areas. These areas are known for supporting, These areas are known for supporting those vulnerable marsh birds like the black tern and the least bittern. Although these areas are funded by hunting, trapping, fishing license fees, they are free and open for anyone to visit, use, and enjoy for most of the year. So even if you're not interested in hunting, trapping, or fishing, these areas are the perfect spot to experience nature, birding and wildlife watching, hiking, or kayaking. Next slide. Michigan has 7 wetland wonders scattered across southern Lower Peninsula that double as managed waterfowl hunt areas, or MWHAs. These areas were created in the 50s and 60s to provide exceptional waterfowl hunting opportunities. The MWHAs are managed in many ways, including extensive diking, water manipulation, and planting additional food sources and grasslands for nesting and migration and for the benefit of other wetland wildlife. The managed waterfowl hunt areas are also well known for supporting high concentrations of waterfowl during migration. The managed hunting concept is what sets these areas apart from the other wetland wonders. Each one of these MWHAs has a draw schedule, which allows hunters to enter a lottery-style drawing for hunting locations daily across each area. Permits are then issued either for the morning, afternoon, or all day based on the specific managed waterfowl hunt area. Throughout the hunting season, each manager of that specific managed waterfowl hunt area provides weekly condition updates and waterfowl counts to assist in tracking the migration through the state. Next slide. One of Michigan's wetland wonders and an example of efforts to acquire high priority wetlands was the acquisition of the 1,279 acre Harson Smith tract, which Jenny had talked a little bit about where most of this management is taking place. So that's the East Dighton unit on the map there. Combined with smaller purchases in the 1960s and 70s and a state forest land transfer, the Wigwam Bay State Wildlife Area boasts over 3,500 acres in total. These acquisitions were aimed at increasing hunting, trapping, fishing, boating, and other wildlife-related recreational opportunities on Saginaw Bay. This area is open year-round with an extensive network of gravel dikes, parking lots, boat launches, and access points. Wigwam Bay has plenty to explore. It is also a stop along on both the Saginaw Bay Birding Trail and the Saginaw Bay Blueways Trail. Next slide. So talking a little bit about some of the habitat management at Wigwam Bay State Wildlife Area, it does have several habitat types, including impounded and coastal wetlands, grasslands, and a bit of forest. The diversity across the Wigwam Bay State Wildlife Area provides opportunity for nesting and brood rearing and areas for spring and fall migratory waterfowl. The East Dyked unit that we talked about before does allow for passive water control through several tube and gate structures. And we were able to restore the old Rifle River channel, which was rerouted during the prosperous timber industry in the 1800s. So that allows for more ebb and flow of water into and through the diked area in the spring. The treatment and or removal of invasive species, particularly Phragmites, has been an important habitat management objective. Using a helicopter and now drone technology for herbicide application and prescribed fire are extremely helpful in creating openings within the marsh and allowing for native vegetation to grow. Next slide. Now I think I'm going to hand it off back to Kylie for a few slides on some specific habitat management at Wigwam Bay.
All right, thank you, Brandy. So some of the work that Audubon has partnered with the DNR on at Wigwam Bay is primarily vegetation management to help open up those overly dense stands of vegetation that doesn't allow for great marsh bird habitat. So specifically, we're mainly talking about invasive and hybrid species of cattails that form these really dense stands, also known as monocultures. So those can be broken up by either mechanical or cutting, herbicide or fire treatment means to improve the habitat by creating more open water areas throughout the vegetation. And this allows for more life diversity in the wetland and in turn better foraging for the birds. And it can also provide better nesting habitat, as Jenny mentioned, for the black terns. So in 2018, Audubon Great Lakes and the DNR intended to conduct an experimental plot treatment within Wigwam Bay, within the impoundment that you can see here. So 3 of the plots were going to be control plots, or otherwise known, they're not going to receive treatment. And then these other 6 plots were going to receive treatment. So 3 of them are going to receive just herbicide application, and the other 3 were going to receive both herbicide and mechanical treatment. But unfortunately, due to the high water levels that we experienced during 2018, the mechanical treatment was not feasible due to just access into the wetland with equipment. So instead, all 6 of those treatment plots received herbicide application. So you can see in these different colored hatchings through the plots, the red hatchings were the treatments that were conducted in 2018. So herbicide application. And then in 2020, so in the blue hatching, an additional application of herbicide was conducted to help kind of supplement that lack of mechanical treatment. And then following those 2018 and 2020 treatments, monitoring was conducted to monitor the response of the vegetation to the herbicide applications. And after a few weeks of the treatment, significant die-off was observed in those plots. So then in 2020, you can see here in this orange strip, herbicide was applied to some invasive Phragmites along that dike system there. So moving forward, some future management that we're going to partner with the DNR on, continued and retreatment with herbicide of invasive species. So some reapplication to those Phragmites stands and some new stands of Phragmites. And then also trying to remove these stands and mats of dead vegetation that form after treatment with the herbicide. So some means that we are exploring to remove this dead vegetation is fire application, as well as mechanical application, so cutting. And this is an example of an aquatic vegetation cutter that was used at St. Clair Flats Wildlife Area. And then also to help reestablish some native vegetation and to help try and suppress the invasives from reestablishing. We're going to be doing some planting of native grass and wildflower seeds along the dike system. So I will pass it back to Brandy to talk about Nayanquing now.
Okay, thanks, Kylie. I'm still having difficulty with my turning my video on, but so okay. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry about that. So switching gears a little bit and talking about Nayanquing Point, um, and talking about the accessibility and outdoor recreation there. About just under 1,400 acres of a managed waterfowl hunt area. Nayanquing Point actually doubles as a wetland wonder and also as oops, hang on one second. I apologize. I'm having a little bit of difficulty here. Sorry about that. Okay. Just hold on one second. Like I said, Nayanquing Point was one of Michigan's wetland wonders and one of the seven managed waterfowl hunt areas, and it's located on the western shore of Saginaw Bay. And like I said, we do have habitat types in grassland, agriculture, lowland shrub, and emergent and coastal marsh. Nayanquing Point is open to foot traffic from January 2nd through August 31st, and we do have a wildlife refuge there that does close from September 1 to January 1. We do have an observation platform that is located at the end of Kitchen Road and is wheelchair accessible and allows for amazing views of coastal and emergent marsh. Nayanquing Point Headquarters and Wildlife Check Station is also a site of considerable public contact. The operation of the check station is important for providing high quality recreational experiences and creating positive public interactions with the DNR. Waterfowl abundance and harvest data that are collected at the managed waterfowl area check stations also provide information on harvest and migration timing across the southern portion of the state. And also, like Wigwam Bay, Nayanquing Point is a stop along both the Saginaw Bay Birding Trail and the Saginaw Bay Blueways Trail. Next slide. Similar to some of the habitat objective managements at Wigwam Bay, Nayanquing Point is made up of several habitat types, including wetland, grassland, agriculture, and coastal marsh. This diversity of habitat provides areas for nesting and brood rearing and refuge areas for spring and fall migratory waterfowl. Agriculture or food plots still play a role in providing additional food source and overhead cover. These impounded units or diked-in units do have water control structures, but one of the different things that separates Wigwam and Nayanquing Point in this regard is that we do have large volume pump stations across the area that are able to assist managers with water level control. And also the treatment and removal of invasive species, particularly Phragmites, has been an important habitat management objective here at Nayanquing Point. We also use helicopter and now drone technology for both herbicide application and prescribed fire to help create openings within the marsh and allow for that native vegetation to grow. Next slide. You may be wondering then how these wetland wonders, managed waterfowl hunt areas, and important bird areas are funded. Audubon does not have the capacity to support IBA conservation outright, so relying on partners, landowners, and conservation managers are key to a successful partnership. In Michigan, the funding falls directly on the shoulders of the DNR, in particular Wildlife Division, when it comes to our wetland wonders and managed waterfowl hunt areas. Next slide. Unfortunately, I don't have the most current statistics related to the Pittman-Robertson Act, which is the excise tax on firearms and ammunition, which in turn supports wildlife management. But funds are generated from hunting and fishing licenses. The ones that were generated in 2023 fund 60% of state natural resources management in the US on average. In Michigan, that number is nearly 90%, as hardly any state taxes are earmarked for natural resources or wildlife. This chart here is a breakdown of the Michigan DNR Wildlife Division funding sources, and it shows three specific trends that are important to note. Fees from the sale or the state hunting and fishing licenses constitute the bulk of the state's conservation and wildlife management activities. So every time a hunter or angler purchases a license, tag, or a permit, that money is funneled into the DNR Wildlife Division for activities such as habitat improvements and invasive species control. The federal funding portion, which makes up approximately half of the division's budget, is mostly through the excise tax on guns, ammunition, and bows and arrows that I mentioned earlier as part of the Pittman-Robertson Act. And just to give a general idea, only about 5% of Wildlife Division's budget came from the state's general fund, which is that tax revenue portion I spoke about earlier. And that is typically dedicated to disease and invasive species management. So as you can see, a lot of the state's funding for Wildlife Division comes from that state license fee. Next slide. In Michigan, we're seeing some increases, but hunting and trapping has been on the decline since the 1990s. Particularly in young women purchasing both hunting and fishing license, we see that little bump or increase, but it isn't enough to offset the overall decline. There is a real urgency as to how states will fund their natural resources and wildlife management as people begin to retire from both the workforce and the hunting community. Next slide. So as mentioned earlier, Michigan's managed waterfowl hunt areas are created to provide that exceptional waterfowl hunting opportunity and are managed to provide waterfowl habitat for nesting and migration and for the benefit of wetland wildlife. But in response to a long-standing need to set and clarify habitat and recreation management priorities, the Wildlife Division recently formed a planning work group to establish a set of goals and objectives for the next 10 years. 4 priorities have been identified in this planning process: enhance ecosystem function, increase waterfowl abundance and diversity, improve satisfaction with waterfowl hunting experience, and improve satisfaction with other recreational activities. Each of the managed waterfowl hunt areas will be responsible for developing a step-down plan that focuses on potential strategies that are specific to each area. There are opportunities scheduled soon for input from the public. Next slide. So hopefully by now, most of you may be wondering, how can I get involved? Next slide. There are several avenues to explore when thinking about getting involved. You may consider supporting local conservation organizations to seek out ways to volunteer or donate to a local area. Just as an example, for me, the Saginaw Bay chapter of the Michigan Duck Hunters Association is one of Nayanquing Point and Wigwam Bay State Wildlife Area's local conservation groups. They volunteer to assist with habitat management projects on the area, including, and not limited to, but wood duck box repair, replacement, and clean out. And they also raise money for the area for other things in the check station, benches, other areas that you might be able to use the area besides hunting. You may also consider purchasing a migratory duck stamp or donating to the non-game fund or adopt a game area program. Next slide. So there are several upcoming opportunities I'd like to mention as a way to get involved or enjoy wetland wonders in your area. On Saturday, August 3rd, from 3:30 to 6:30 at the Saginaw Bay Waterfowl and Outdoor Festival, that managed waterfowl area work group that I spoke about earlier, its members and some of the local area staff will be there to give an overview of a 10-year managed waterfowl hunt plan and the proposed management strategies for those step-down plans for each individual area. And there will be opportunities to provide feedback there and ask general questions. There will be an additional webinar or an open house scheduled for the managed waterfowl hunt area implementation plan, and that date will be coming out soon. On Tuesday, October 1st, that would be at 6 o'clock at the Nayanquing Point State Wildlife Area, we are going to be hosting our fall open house. This is an opportunity to see our annual habitat projects completed and take a sneak peek into the refuge to view staging waterfowl for the upcoming waterfowl season. Also, the 2025 spring open houses at each one of the managed areas will be scheduled, and those most likely will happen between March and May of 2025. And some of those spring open houses may be held in conjunction with the Tawas Point Migration Days, which also occur in May. So please sign up for our monthly newsletter to receive future webinar and event invitations via email. And I think our next slide involves questions, so I'm going to hand it back off to Erin, who will help facilitate the Q&A session.
Thanks so much, Brandy. And thanks everyone for submitting your questions in the chat. We have a handful here that we will answer. If you have any more questions, feel free to enter them in the chat as well as we start kicking things off with these questions. So the first question was, how do I know when the areas are off limits due to hunting? And which hunting seasons, small game, large game, waterfowl, etc., are included in any restrictions on visitations? And Brandy, I was hoping you could take that one.
Yes. So most of the areas have their posted schedule of when they're closed. Unfortunately, we don't go with the positive, which is when are they open. So those waterfowl seasons are different every year when they start, particularly the start date. So again, our refuges will be closed typically September 1 to January 1. If they're not posted, they will be posted open to hunting, which also means open to everything else. So I think did I get all of that, all of the parts to that?
I think so, and I did share a link in the chat as well if folks have specific questions about when waterfowl hunting starts. I shared the waterfowl digest there. And for folks that want to explore when other seasons kick off, if there are areas you want to explore and are able to access during hunting season, as Brandy mentioned, just make sure you're aware of what seasons are occurring, to wear orange and to avoid certain times of day. I think most hunters are really active kind of at dawn and dusk. And so midday is a better time of day to avoid any conflicts with hunters or flushing birds accidentally when they're out hunting. Does that sound right, Brandy?
Yes, the only stipulation I would say is like for other small game and deer hunting, the managed waterfowl areas have the waterfowl hunting has preference on those managed waterfowl hunt areas. So it's best to check with the local area you're looking to access, and then they will tell you what areas are off limits and what restrictions there are.
Okay, great. Thank you. I was wondering as well, Brandy, another question for you as far as amenities available at these two sites. At Nayanquing Point, are there restrooms at the headquarters or near the observation tower that folks can use? And then the same question for Wigwam.
For Wigwam, it's pretty rustic, so there are no amenities there. There is a building there, but it does not have any amenities. For Nayanquing Point, we do have restrooms available in the check station. So we are typically open from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday until October when we start our waterfowl hunting season, and then we're open on weekends as well. And there are no restrooms at the observation tower.
Okay, great. Thank you. And somebody did ask if we'll be emailing participants the website links that we listed as well, and we will send some of those to you all in a follow-up email. We will be sharing an email address for Brandy at the end of the presentation today, and myself for the My Birds program. So if you do have follow-up questions or want to get in touch with us, you'll be able to do so. Let's see. And we had a question too, where can I find a map of areas that are dedicated to or recommended for birding? So I'm wondering, as far as, or if with that question, if that person is able to add a little bit more, is this just areas in Michigan that you're interested in, or areas specifically within these state wildlife areas? If it's Michigan on the whole, I would recommend visiting Michigan DNR's website. And I'll get that link in the chat, but michigan.gov /birding. And they have a landing page that has links to all of Michigan's birding trails, which are statewide. And a lot of those birding trails, as Brandy mentioned, both Nayanquing Point and Wigwam Bay are part of the Saginaw Bay birding trail. A lot of these important bird areas and state game and wildlife areas are also pit stops on a lot of Michigan's birding trails. And then areas within these specific wildlife areas, currently the maps that we shared in the presentation are the only maps we have. But it would be a great idea to contact DNR and head over to headquarters if you have questions on where to go. The staff would be able to give you some recommendations. And the address for headquarters and the phone number are at the top of those maps. Let's see. Another question for you, probably, Brandy. What is the ruling on EV bikes in these areas, and mainly on the dikes?
So currently that policy is being looked at and revised. So as of now, here at both Wigwam and Nayanquing, those are not allowed. So e-bikes are not allowed.
Okay, all right. And then at Wigwam, has raccoon trapping been successful in reducing their numbers? I know, yeah.
Unfortunately, we do have trappers in the area. We permit trappers. So last year we had 10 trappers, but they do not, unfortunately, target raccoons. So we may have to look into trying to make that more of a not necessarily guideline, but maybe have to look into that further to put a little pressure on the raccoons there.
Great, thank you. And then somebody was also wondering about finding information on accessibility for these two areas. Are either of these areas practical bird watching sites for a wheelchair user? And I know you'd mentioned the observation point is wheelchair accessible at Nayanquing Point. But is there any other information as far as accessibility, Brandy, that
at like you mentioned at Nayanquing, yes, the tower itself is wheelchair accessible. The parking lot may be pretty rustic or a little bit harder to navigate. It is graveled, it's not blacktopped. So that may or may not be an issue. Our dikes here at Nayanquing Point are not all gravel topped. And they do have uneven surfaces, so it may be a little difficult. At Wigwam Bay, you may have a little bit more of an option because some of those dikes are gravel topped, but again, they're going to be uneven surfaces, so it may be a little bit difficult depending on your needs.
Okay. And then another resource that folks could look into is Michigan Freedom Outdoors, and they work primarily with hunters, but other outdoor recreationists, and provide all-terrain wheelchairs for access to public lands. So if you Google them, and this is another link I can share in the chat, these are folks that we've worked with in the past for some My Birds field trips that have been able to provide all-terrain wheelchairs for folks. So that is one other resource you could look into. Let's see. And then I do see a follow-up question related to the birding trails in Michigan. Are any birding trails devoid of hunting? Yes, they're, in addition to a lot of birding trails, including state game and wildlife areas, a lot of the other pit stops along those birding trails are not game areas, not game or wildlife areas where hunting is happening. So you can explore those maps, and they'll detail kind of each of those pit stops in those maps. For the observation tower as well, is that open all year, or does access to that close as well starting September 1st?
No, that remains open. The observation tower is open year round.
Okay, great. And then we have another question. How is the yellow-headed blackbird population this year? I'm not sure if you have any updates on that, Brandy. I did not take a peek at eBird for observations from this summer, but
Right, that's what I was just going to ask you if you had to happen to take a look at it. We still are seeing really decent numbers. I mean, it's very obvious when we are out doing habitat work that isn't even close to the marsh or where they typically would be. We see them on, right off the dike, right in some of, some of our farm units. They seem to be in our parking lot right at the headquarters. So sometimes you don't have to go very far to find them. So they do seem like they have a pretty healthy population.
okay, great, great. I am seeing a question as well, if there's a relationship with local utility companies with trying to save alive or dead trees from being torn down in these areas. Just that in Royal Oak, it looks like utility companies seem to be removing a wider and wider area and birds are losing habitat. So wanted to ask that. Brandy, I don't know if you have worked with local utility companies.
I haven't personally here or on my areas. Wigwam Bay is pretty remote, so and we don't even have electricity run out to the headquarters building or the pole barn that we have there. So there isn't much happening there as far as tree removal. I know at Nayanquing Point we do try to keep our shoreline, which is right along Saginaw Bay, in a healthy condition. We do try to spray for Phragmites in some of our marshes. So we definitely want to avoid those trees. But as far as utility companies, we don't really have a lot of power run out to the majority of our marshes here.
Okay. All right, sounds good. And then I see we had another question. If I buy a duck stamp, does that give me access September 1st to January 2nd? Brandy, I don't know if you want to chime in on that one again.
Well, I think the duck stamp, if the federal duck stamp is what's required to also what is required to hunt waterfowl. So it doesn't give you the access as far as accessing our refuge unit. That is closed September 1 to January 1. And that's for waterfowl specifically to have that refuge area to use undisturbed. There is no one in that area at that time, even hunters. So that refuge portion is closed and off limits to everyone. So what the stamp does is provide money on a larger scale, not specific to Nayanquing Point or other of these managed areas, but on a much larger scale for wetland acquisition and habitat improvement. So, and it happens to be also required to hunt migratory waterfowl.
Thanks, Brandy. And I will add, I believe when you buy a migratory duck stamp that it gives you like access to federal wildlife refuges. But again, I think folks would have to check in with local managers about any hunting seasons happening within some wildlife refuges. I know there is some hunting in some of them as well during the fall. All right, wonderful. I think we've answered all of our questions. I'm not seeing one that we've overlooked in my notes, but if you do have a follow-up question or feel that I did miss your question, the next slide will show my email address and Brandy's email address, and you can reach out to us directly. If you're interested in learning more about Michigan's birds or learning more about upcoming webinars like this or ambassador events, My Birds Ambassador events, you can follow us on social media or visit our website at gl.audubon.org/MIBirds. Thank you all so much. We're very happy that you were here today with us. We had almost 150 people join live, so thank you very much. and we will be sharing the recording out with you all in a follow-up email with some resources shortly. All right, take care, everyone.